Welcome to Life Stories, where sometimes the smallest voice carries the loudest truth. What if the thing your child feared most wasn't failure, but the silence after she tried? What if just once someone stood up and said, "Go on," and that one sentence changed everything? This isn't a story about fame. It's not about talent shows or standing ovations. It's about a girl who almost gave up before she began, and a mother who refused to let the world decide who her daughter could be. It's about what happens when doubt becomes inheritance, and how one act of courage can break that cycle forever. If you've ever been told to stay quiet, to shrink, to stop dreaming, this one's for you. Let me take you back to a peeling white fence, a secondhand keyboard, and a single moment that cracked open a future no one saw coming. Brooklyn Hart had always been a quiet kind of storm. She didn't crash through doors or raise her voice. She didn't light up rooms when she entered, but she noticed everything. The way her mother, Jenna, rubbed her temples at night when counting tips from the second job. The way her Aunt Rachel's compliments always came with a pause, like waiting for a punchline. And most of all, the way people looked at her when she said nothing, like they assumed there was nothing worth hearing. Brooklyn lived in a fading two-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Dayton, Ohio, where sidewalks cracked like tired bones and the corner store sold more lottery tickets than milk. Her mother worked two jobs, receptionist by day, janitor by night. And Brooklyn? Well, Brooklyn wrote songs in secret, hummed into the cracked mic of an old iPhone. She had never sung in front of anyone, not really. Just the walls, just the shadows, just herself. Jenna called her little firefly, not because she glowed, but because she only lit up when no one was watching. But things were changing, slowly, sharply. It started with a flyer. It was taped crookedly to the window of the Dollar General, between a missing cat poster and an ad for half-price manicures. Tri-County Youth Talent Showcase, ages 10 to 17. Singers, dancers, poets, dreamers, welcome. Jenna stood in front of it for a long time. Maybe too long. Her hands trembled slightly as she snapped a picture of it, the kind of tremble that comes when hope feels dangerous. She didn't show it to Brooklyn right away. She waited. Waited until the day Brooklyn's voice floated through the apartment like smoke. Jenna had been about to knock on the door, tell her to go to bed, but the voice stopped her. It wasn't powerful. It wasn't polished. But it had truth. The kind of truth you don't expect to hear in a 13-year-old song. That night, Jenna cried into her pillow. Not because she was sad, but because she knew her daughter had something, and that something might not survive the world unless someone fought for it. When Jenna finally showed Brooklyn the flyer, her daughter stared at it like it was written in another language. "Could I? Really?" she asked. Jenna only said, "Yes." Brooklyn practiced every night after that. She wrote an original song, Still Rising, one fragile lyric at a time. She sang it quietly in the shower, under her breath while brushing her teeth, whispered verses into the collar of her hoodie on the school bus. Jenna never pushed, just listened from the hallway, heart clenched with something between pride and terror, because she knew what was coming. The night before the audition, the family had dinner at Rachel's house. The good china was out. Rachel's twins wore matching polo shirts. Jenna had told Brooklyn not to bring it up, but of course she did. "I'm singing tomorrow," she said between bites of mashed potatoes, "at the youth showcase." The room froze. Rachel's fork clinked against her plate. "That's sweet," she said, "but maybe stick to church choirs for now." Jenna's father sighed. He didn't even look up. "Music's not a career, it's a hobby. You need to focus on school." Brooklyn shrank. Her shoulders rounded inward, her voice faded. That spark Jenna had been guarding like glass began to flicker. Later that night, on the drive home, Brooklyn didn't say much. Just stared out the window, mouth pressed into a line. The morning of the showcase, she didn't eat. She barely dressed. Jenna tried everything, jokes, pep talks, even an impromptu sing-along that landed flat. Brooklyn just said, "It doesn't matter." But Jenna knew better. She knew that kind of silence. She'd lived it once herself, years ago, when she had dreams too. When someone told her she wasn't good enough and she believed it, and she refused to let her daughter carry that same inheritance. At the community center, Brooklyn looked so small in the chaos. Kids in sequins warming up, parents fussing over lip gloss and lighting. She wore a faded hoodie and sneakers with worn-out soles. Her name was pinned crookedly to her chest. She sat in the far corner, knees drawn up, staring at the floor. Right before she was called backstage, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Rachel. "Break a leg. Just don't overdo it. No need to show off." Brooklyn locked her phone without a word and handed it to Jenna like it was suddenly too heavy to hold. Then she walked away. Jenna followed quietly, stood just beyond the wings as Brooklyn took her place behind the curtain. Her hands trembled. Her lips moved silently. She looked like she might run. When her name was called, she didn't move. Whispers rippled through the audience. Jenna stepped forward, reached out, and took her daughter's hand. "Go on," she whispered. Brooklyn looked up like she was standing at the edge of a cliff. And then she nodded. She stepped out. The lights hit her like a slap. The microphone stood taller than her. She adjusted it with shaking fingers. The first piano notes began. The melody she'd practiced 100 times. She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. And then, suddenly, a voice from the crowd rang out, "Wait, that's my song." Every head in the auditorium turned. Brooklyn froze. From the third row a woman stood. Dark curls, leather jacket, no makeup. She walked toward the judges' table, speaking quietly to them. They nodded, whispered, then motioned her toward the stage. She stepped to the mic off stage. "My name is Valerie Quinn," she said. "I wrote Still Rising 3 years ago. Uploaded it to a tiny blog. Forgot about it. No one ever sang it. No one even noticed." She looked at Brooklyn, her voice breaking. "But hearing you sing it, it's like I heard it for the first time." Brooklyn blinked. She looked to Jenna, to the judges, to the crowd, and then she turned back to the mic, and she sang. Her voice didn't roar. It didn't soar, but it spoke. It cut. It was flawed and fragile and real. And when she hit the chorus, "I'm still rising, even if you don't see me yet," the entire auditorium seemed to stop breathing. When she finished, there was a long, loaded silence. Then the judges stood. Then the crowd. Not polite clapping, not polite anything. A standing ovation. Jenna watched her daughter's face transform. Not with joy, not with pride, with belief. Valerie came backstage later, knelt in front of Brooklyn and said, "If you ever want to write with me or just talk, you have something. You reminded me why I started." And for the first time in her life, Brooklyn didn't hide her voice. She opened her notebook, and she began to write again. Have you ever let fear silence something beautiful inside you? What would happen if, just once, you believed in yourself more than the world doubted you? Because what happened next to Brooklyn, no one, not even her mother, could have seen coming. Brooklyn couldn't sleep that night. Not because of the applause or the comments flooding in on the video someone had uploaded to YouTube. Not even because Valerie Quinn had hugged her backstage and whispered, "You saved something in me tonight." It was because something inside her had shifted, tilted, like the earth beneath her feet had changed direction. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying the moment she thought she'd lose her voice again. The breath caught in her throat, the silence, the accusation. Wait, that's my song. It could have broken her, and for a split second, it did. But she hadn't run. She sang. By morning, the video had gained a few thousand views. Nothing viral by global standards, but for a small town in Ohio, it was enough to wake up the neighborhood. Jenna's phone buzzed all day. Brooklyn's inbox was full of messages from classmates who'd never spoken to her before. Some wanted to congratulate her. Others wanted to know where she got the song. One message stood out. It was from a girl named Lexi, a senior at her high school. Lexi was popular, cheerleader, student council, Instagram perfect. But her message was short, almost shy. "I watched your video. I used to sing too. I stopped. But watching you, I don't know. It made me miss that part of me." Brooklyn read it 3 times. But just as quickly as the high began, something darker crept in. Rachel hadn't called. Neither had her grandparents. When Jenna brought it up at dinner, Brooklyn just shrugged. Maybe they're busy. But her voice was too even, too detached. That weekend, Valerie invited Brooklyn to visit her home studio. Jenna drove her out to a converted barn tucked into the woods just outside Columbus. Inside, it was warm and earthy, with worn rugs, acoustic guitars on the walls, and a big picture window overlooking a lake. Brooklyn had never seen anything like it. Valerie handed her tea, sat cross-legged on the floor, and asked, "Tell me the story behind Still Rising." Brooklyn hesitated. "I didn't know it was yours. I swear I didn't mean to." Valerie held up a hand. "I'm not mad. I'm grateful. You took something I thought was forgotten and made it matter again. But I want to know, why that song? What made it yours?" Brooklyn looked down at her cup. "Because I felt invisible for so long. At school, at home, even around people who are supposed to know me. I wrote my own version of it because I needed a way to prove I exist." Valerie nodded slowly. "Then it really is yours." They spent the afternoon writing. Brooklyn was hesitant at first, but as Valerie gently prodded her, ideas began spilling out. Lines she didn't even know were inside her. Melodies she'd been humming in secret. But then, during a break, Valerie picked up her phone and frowned. "You didn't tell me about this." Brooklyn looked over. It was a social media post, an anonymous comment thread on the video. Dozens of replies. Most were kind, but one stood out. "Kid steals song and plays the victim." Typical. Brooklyn's heart dropped. Valerie looked furious. "This is garbage. People just want to tear down anything that scares them." But Brooklyn couldn't unsee it. She imagined her classmates reading it, her teachers. Rachel, the voice that had only just started to believe in itself? It began to shrink again. "I didn't mean to steal anything," Brooklyn said quietly. "You didn't," Valerie said. "I gave that song to the world 3 years ago, and the world gave it to you." But Brooklyn wasn't sure anyone else would understand. That night, she didn't write. She didn't sing. She scrolled. Read more comments. Found a small Reddit thread accusing her of faking originality. A few even claimed Jenna had helped her cheat. Jenna found her curled up on the couch, earbuds in, eyes hollow. "Talk to me," Jenna said, kneeling beside her. "I shouldn't have sung it," Brooklyn whispered. "I should have just kept quiet. I never meant to." Jenna cupped her face. "You didn't do anything wrong. They're just loud. That doesn't make them right." "But what if they're not wrong?" Jenna didn't flinch. "Then tell them the truth. Tell them everything. Your version, your story, or let your next song speak louder than they ever could." But Brooklyn wasn't ready. Days passed. She stopped opening Valerie's emails. She skipped the open mic Valerie invited her to. She turned down an interview with the local news. At school, people stared, some whispered. A few offered forced smiles, like they weren't sure if they should cheer or stay silent. And then Rachel called. Brooklyn didn't answer, so Rachel left a voicemail. "I watched the video. I know I wasn't kind, but this attention, it won't last. Be careful. Don't get a big head." That night, Brooklyn walked into Jenna's room holding her phone. "Can I ask you something?" "Anything." "Why didn't you sing? When you were younger. You told me once you wanted to." Jenna exhaled. "Because someone made me believe I wasn't enough, and I let them. I didn't fight back." Brooklyn nodded slowly. "And what if I'm not enough either?" Jenna stood, walked to her, and placed a hand over her heart. "Then tell me how something not enough made an entire room stand up, made a grown woman cry, made me, your mother, feel like I was watching something holy." Brooklyn looked at her, eyes glassy. "What if I can't do it again?" "Then you try. Not to be seen, not to go viral, but to remember who you are when the world isn't watching." Brooklyn didn't respond. But later that night, she pulled out her notebook again, just looked at it, touched the spine. The next morning, she woke up early. She went outside, barefoot, hoodie zipped to her chin, and stood in the cold spring air. She whispered a melody into the wind, just for herself. What would you do if the thing that gave you a voice was suddenly the thing the world tried to use against you? And when Brooklyn receives an unexpected invitation that could change everything, she'll have to decide, hide again or rise louder than ever before. Stay tuned for part 3. The invitation came on a Thursday. Brooklyn had just come home from school. her backpack sliding off her shoulder, when Jenna handed her the envelope. It was soft, ivory-colored, with her name written in black ink, not typed, but handwritten, like something sacred. She turned it over, hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a letter, thick cream cardstock with a gold emblem embossed at the top. The National Emerging Voices Summit. She blinked, reread the first line. We are pleased to invite Brooklyn Hart to perform her original work at our annual showcase in New York City. New York. Brooklyn read it aloud 3 times, her voice barely above a whisper. Then she looked up at her mom, who had tears already threatening at the corners of her eyes. It's real? Brooklyn asked. Jenna nodded. It's real. That night, Brooklyn lay awake, staring at the ceiling again, but this time her chest was buzzing with something that wasn't anxiety. It was fire. It was electricity. It was the sound of the door inside her creaking open again. But joy never arrives alone. 2 days later, the backlash returned. An online article. A small one. A blog, maybe. But it was cruel. It painted her as a fraud, said she didn't deserve the attention, claimed she'd stolen the song entirely even after Valerie had gone public defending her. There were even screenshots, edited, clearly, suggesting Brooklyn had copied the lyrics. She knew they were fake, but still, the seed of doubt had already been planted. She stopped eating again, stopped humming. Jenna tried to reach her, but Brooklyn had retreated into the quiet place she used to live in. That place before the stage, before the light. Valerie called, left voicemails, emails. Brooklyn didn't answer. And the days ticked by one after the other until the summit was only 5 days away. Then something strange happened. Brooklyn received a message from Lexi again, the girl from her school who used to sing. Hey, I know it's been weird, but I believe you. And even if someone doesn't, that doesn't take away what you did on that stage. It mattered. You mattered. Attached was a video. It was Lexi, sitting on her bedroom floor, guitar in hand, singing a stripped-down version of Still Rising. Her voice cracked halfway through. She cried on the final line. Brooklyn watched it 5 times. And then she cried too. Not because she was sad, but because for the first time she understood something Jenna had been trying to tell her from the beginning. It was never about being perfect. It was about being true. That night, she walked into the living room with her guitar, one Valerie had given her, and sat on the rug across from her mom. I want to go, she said softly, to New York. Jenna just smiled and nodded. The train ride to New York was quiet. Brooklyn spent most of it staring out the window, notebook in hand, scribbling lines that didn't quite rhyme and melodies that didn't quite land, but they were hers. The summit was held at a small historic theater just off Broadway. Not enormous, but elegant. Velvet seats, gold trim, a stage that felt taller than it was. She arrived early, sound-checked, and sat backstage while others performed. A girl played cello. A boy recited slam poetry that made people hold their breath. Then her name was called. Brooklyn Hart, original song. She walked out slowly, not because she was scared, but because she wanted to feel every step. The lights didn't blind her this time. She looked out into the audience, found Jenna in the 3rd row, and smiled. Valerie was next to her, hands clasped tightly. Lexi had sent flowers, delivered to the green room with a note that said simply, "Rise again." Brooklyn adjusted the mic, sat on the stool, and began to play. The song was new. It wasn't Still Rising. It was called Enough. The lyrics told a story, not just hers, but of every kid who'd been told to sit down, be quiet, not reach too far. Every kid who'd whispered songs into the dark, afraid of being laughed at. Every girl who had ever been called too sensitive, or too much, or not enough. And when she sang the chorus, "I'm not broken, I'm becoming," the room went still. Not even a cough, not even a shuffle, just silence, and then applause. But not thunderous, not wild. It was slow, like a rising tide. It grew and grew until everyone was standing, hands above their heads, faces soft with something like awe. After the show, a woman approached her, gray-haired, stylish, editor of a music magazine. She didn't introduce herself at first. She just said, "You reminded me why we still need art." Brooklyn smiled. Not out of pride, out of peace, because she knew finally that what she gave on that stage was real. A few weeks later, she received an email from a producer at an indie label in Chicago. He'd seen the video. He wanted to talk. Brooklyn didn't say yes immediately. Instead, she walked to the window, watched the wind tug at the branches outside, and opened her notebook. There were still things she needed to write, and she would. But now, she would write them with the door open. 3 months later, Brooklyn was singing at a local community fundraiser. Nothing huge, just folding chairs, paper lanterns, a modest mic setup. Rachel showed up, no announcement, no warning, just stood in the back, arms folded. Afterward, she approached Brooklyn slowly. "I was wrong," Rachel said. "I was scared. Not of your failure, of your courage." Brooklyn nodded. "Thank you," she said, "but not out of politeness, out of understanding. Sometimes the apology you need doesn't come when you want it, but when you're finally strong enough to not need it anymore." Brooklyn walked away from that conversation lighter. And later that night, as she sang under the stars, she saw kids in the audience mouthing her lyrics. Her lyrics. That's when it hit her. She hadn't just changed her own story. She'd rewritten the ending for someone else too. How did this story make you feel? What moment stayed with you the most? Comment 100 if this story touched your heart. Tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories travel. Share this video with a friend who needs to believe in their voice again. Thank you for watching Life Stories.